Hello, I'm Esther Githu-Ewart. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. The White House calls Israel and its partners repelling of Iran's weekend attack an incredible military achievement. It has been 1 year since a war broke out in Sudan, and analysts see no end in sight to the conflict. And 10 years after 276 Nigerian Chibok girls were seized by Boko Haram, 82 students remain in captivity and mass kidnappings have returned. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. The White House is calling it an incredible military achievement by Israel, the United States and other partners in repelling more than 300 drones and missiles launched by Iran toward Israel. But what happens next in the 6-month conflict between Israel and Hamas that is threatening to envelop the Middle East? VOA White House correspondent Anita Powell has more from the White House.
The White House on Sunday declared Iran's first direct attack on Israel an abject failure, with 99% of missiles intercepted before they could hit. U.S. President Joe Biden cut short a weekend trip to his home state of Delaware to return to the White House Saturday, where he spent hours on the phone with world leaders or in meetings in the Situation Room. White House officials also told reporters that Washington does not back an Israeli counterattack. The Biden administration stressed one point on Sunday.
The president has made it clear we do not seek a war with Iran.
As daylight dawned, Israeli leaders sought to focus on what this attack means for solidarity against Iran, which backs the militant groups that struck Israel on October 7th and sent the region spiraling into violence.
We have an opportunity here to establish a strategic alliance against this serious threat from Iran, which threatens to put nuclear explosives on the heads of these missiles. This thing could be a very serious threat. The U.S., Israel, and its allies stand shoulder to shoulder to defend against this threat.
Tehran vowed to retaliate for the suspected Israeli strike on the Iranian consulate in Damascus earlier this month. And Iran's ambassador to the United Nations argued Sunday that the consulate strike justified Iran's response. He stressed that Iran doesn't seek conflict with the U.S., but ended his speech with a warning.
However, if the U.S. initiate military operation against Iran, its citizen, or its security and interest, Iran will use its inherent right to respond proportionately. I thank you.
Although Israelis expected this, it was still a harrowing night, many said the next day.
Nobody knew what to expect. Everybody was home waiting. So it was totally new experience. Eventually, people were very relieved because the attack was blocked.
The big question before Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is how Israel will respond.
And I think Israel, in the way it's calculating how it will respond from now on, it also sees some opportunities for reversing the negative trend in its image within the West, given what happened yesterday and the restraint that is now projecting in responding to that.
As world leaders mull what's next, for the Palestinian families caught in the middle of this brutal conflict that has consumed Gaza, the question could not be more urgent. Anita Powell, VOA News, Washington.
For more insight on what's happening in the Middle East, Nola Haynes, a political scientist at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, joins us from here in Washington. Nola, welcome to Africa 54. I couldn't see you, but what has been the U.S. government's response to the barrage of missile and drone attacks on Israel?
Well, the response has been successful. I want to start there. And the net of defenses ranging from the eastern of the Mediterranean, from the Red Sea to the Gulf. This speaks to what President Biden talks about when he says that we will absolutely support Israel, our security partner, our long-term security partner and long-term ally in the region. But that does not mean that U.S. boots will be on the ground. And I think that's an important distinction to make.
Nola, if there's an escalation by either Israel or Iran, is there even a slight chance that the United States will change its position?
We will continue to support our allies the same way that we did when Iran's missile attack failed. We will continue to do the same thing. But again, what's really important here to stress, and I know a lot of Americans are really, really worried, will we see American lives at risk because of what's happening in the Middle East. And as the White House has said, along with G7 partners, that we will continue to support Israel. But in terms of reversing our policy of boots on the ground, I don't see that happening. I could be incredibly wrong, but I don't see that happening. The president seems resolute in making sure that there aren't any U.S. boots on the ground.
Nola, thank you very much for your reporting. Nola Haynes is a political scientist at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. It's been 1 year since war erupted in Sudan, and many analysts foresee no end to the conflict. They say the longer it drags on, the more likely Sudan will become a breeding ground for terrorist groups. VOA spoke via video to a volunteer at one of the last functioning hospitals in Omdurman. Henry Wilkins reports.
From day one of Sudan's war a year ago, fighting between the Sudanese Armed Forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces has ravaged Sudan's twin cities of Khartoum, its capital, and Omdurman, its largest. Millions have fled the metropolitan area because of the fighting. Some have stayed, however, either because they don't have the means to leave, or in a few cases, because they chose to stay and help. Momin Ahmed Abbas volunteers at one of Omdurman's last functional hospitals and refuses to flee the city.
I cannot abandon them, especially when they rely on my support. Thus, I remain to ensure that injured individuals have access to essentials like food, shelter, and medical care. Leaving would only exacerbate the situation for those in need.
He says the situation is desperate at the hospital, which lacks medical supplies and security, and is vulnerable to frequent airstrikes and fighting. Humanitarian groups and international journalists have found entry into Khartoum and many other parts of Sudan all but impossible. And as a result, the world's awareness of the country's troubles has diminished. Commentators and diplomats often refer to Sudan's conflict as the world's forgotten war, despite as many as 16,000 people estimated to have died because of the conflict and 8.6 million forcibly displaced. Analysts say pressure from the international community is needed to bring the warring sides to the negotiating table. But one doesn't see that happening anytime soon.
Sadly, I don't see this conflict as particularly ripe for any kind of resolution right now. Both sides think either that they can win or they have to win. And as long as they continue to be sustained by external actors, providing them weapons and intelligence, then they're going to continue this fight.
A recent US intelligence report says the longer the war drags on, the more likely Sudan will become a breeding ground for terrorists. One analyst who spoke to VOA echoed this view.
You got young people, and they have all the fuel. They have the anger, they have the ethnic division, and then they have whatever is the narrative about there is a just war happening somewhere.
Leaders of both warring sides are wildly unpopular among most Sudanese. Neither has ever been democratically elected. Yet Sudanese civilians are the ones bearing the brunt of the ongoing fighting. Abbas says Sudan needs external help and intervention.
We desperately need international support to address the crisis in Sudan. Awareness must be raised about the ongoing suffering and devastation.
Yet, after 1 year of fighting in Sudan, it seems clear that no substantial help is on its way. Henry Wilkins, VOA News.
Human Rights Watch says there has been widespread intentional killings and other atrocities committed by warring sides. Calls for the international community to halt the war and give dialogue a chance has fallen on deaf ears. For more on the Sudanese conflict, I'm joined live via Skype from Cardiff, Great Britain, by El-Bashir Idris, a Sudanese human rights activist. Mr. Idris, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
Now, it's been a year of bloodshed, loved ones gone forever, a country in ruins. What will it take for Sudan to end this war?
Well, if you talk politics with a person, they're replying politics. If you talk diplomacy, they're replying diplomacy. If you talk hate, they're replying with hate. And the situation in Sudan is full of that and rife with it. The discussions and dialogues that need to happen in Sudan must be the opposite of hate. and those kind of rhetoric that we've been seeing that's been further polarizing the society, its people, and the country. So for it to come to an end, there must be much more spaces to allow these conversations to happen. However, as said, the Sudanese people are the ones who are taking the most brunt of this war, not only through stray bullets, but also through a looming starvation and famine. Furthermore, it's not as easy to get people within the same room to talk with each other, especially when you have repression against civilians, against human rights activists, against those who want to set things straight in Sudan.
Idris, who are the financiers of Hemeti and al-Burhan? Who is giving them the weapons? Who is supporting this war outside of Sudan?
Well, one is a state actor. The other one was a former state actor, now a militia, always has been a militia. With the state actor of Sudanese Armed Forces, we have Egypt, we have Saudi Arabia, we even have Iran into the mix. On the other hand, we also have Ukraine with Ukrainian special forces on the ground in Omdurman who are fighting against the Rapid Support Forces and their allies. And their allies include Wagner, they include the United Arab Emirates, and they include Ethiopia, Uganda, and other nations that see fit to give legitimacy to the ruler or to the head of the militia, Hemeti.
Now, you have been documenting atrocities committed against the Sudanese civilians since the war began. Give us a brief, on exactly what you found has been happening to civilians in Sudan.
Well, this started by first documenting the Sudanese people's hopes and admirations during the revolution in 2019. However, as you're doing this, you can't help but see the darker shades of humanity that we've been seeing in Sudan, from piles of bodies being seen from space to extrajudicial killings, ethnic killings as well. However, during an internet blackout for almost more than coming up to 3 months now, information coming out has become much more difficult to obtain and to verify, especially with telecoms and internet not working as they used to. Though the atrocities we've seen, put it this way, everything that you can imagine under the sun, but much more worse. We are facing torture. The people are facing sham courts, arresting people for no reason. But we're also seeing mass rapes, human and sex trafficking of young girls and child soldiers being forced to fight. And that's just amongst a long list of many violations and atrocities we've seen this past year.
In 20 seconds, Idris, what do you want the international community to do?
To speak to its allies that are funding and supporting the external partners of this war, to put pressure onto them to stop abetting and aiding in this war, specifically Western allies, to speak to UAE to heavily reconsider its role and function within this war. Along with today, sanctions have come out from the UK and from Canada, but are these sanctions enough? We've seen for the past year that maybe it's not enough to end it.
Right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Idris al-Bashir. Idris is a Sudanese human rights activist. As the war in Sudan marks 1 year, the two main parties, Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces, are continuing to besiege the country, forcing millions to flee. Those now displaced in the Sudanese diaspora are saying not enough is being done by the international community to address the conflict. VOA's Nabil Biagio is standing by here in Washington, where protesters are gathering to encourage a greater United States response to the issue. Hello, Nabil. Tell us what's happening where you are.
Hello, Esther. I'm out here at Freedom Plaza on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., just 10 minutes away from the White House, where around 40 or 50 Sudanese and friends of Sudan have gathered to send a message to U.S. policymakers to say peace and justice for Sudan. Keep your eyes on Sudan, action on Sudan right now, speak out on Sudan. The message is clear. They're urging action to end the war, the one-year war. They want peace achieved. They want justice achieved for the victims. They want the U.S. to pressure Sudan's warring parties, the army and the paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces, to end the bloodshed and restore peace in the country. Just earlier today, about 20 minutes ago, the program started by U.S. Representative Jim McGovern giving a speech, a very passionate speech. He said he's frustrated, he's angry at the inaction here in Washington, D.C., at the lack of action, and that the U.S. is not doing enough to end the bloodshed in Sudan.
Who is participating in the protest?
The protest has been organized. We have several groups. We have Amnesty International. We have groups like GRIFNA. We have SAPA, the Sudanese American Physicians Association. We have Refugees International. We have Refugee Congress. And then we have local groups from Sudan and groups here from the U.S. They have all come together and put this event together to send one united message. And of course, Sudanese living in the DMV area, DC, Maryland, Virginia, are turning out to participate.
Nabil, thank you very much for your reporting. Come back with more so we can dive into that tomorrow. Nabil Biagio is a viewer reporter live for us from downtown Washington, D.C. It has been 10 years since 276 schoolgirls were abducted by Boko Haram from the Nigerian town of Chibok. The incident sparked global outrage. 82 students remain in captivity, and mass kidnappings have returned in recent weeks. The Bring Back Our Girls activists are holding a week-long global campaign to remind Nigerian authorities of their failed promise to secure the release of the remaining girls.
This public park was once a symbol of hope and resilience, but now it holds memories of a struggle to save 82 schoolgirls still in captivity from the 276 kidnapped by Boko Haram on April 14, 2014 from Chibok Secondary School. One of them is Nkeki Muta's niece.
Every day, in the morning, in the afternoon, we feel pain about this because of the absence of this our niece. We heard that some were dead, and that is one of the things that we are advocating. If government can be kind enough to tell us or to release all the names of those that are dead, so that we can forget about it.
Days following the kidnappings, activists coalesced and started the Bring Back Our Girls or BBOG movement, demanding their rescue. Back then, the group met here daily and their campaign sparked global outrage, but not anymore.
There is fatigue in the struggle. When the Bring Back Our Girls started and it was gaining traction globally, there are a lot of responses from even foreign governments ready to support Nigeria.
So far, 194 girls have returned, either by escaping or they were freed through government negotiations. But the threat of mass kidnapping remains. Amnesty International says Nigeria has recorded 17 cases in which at least 1,700 children were seized from schools since Chibok. Recent attacks have been perpetrated by armed gangs known as bandits. The gangs often demand huge ransoms to free their captives. Nigerian authorities say they have not forgotten those in captivity.
If it was we're using the conventional method of fighting, we will have entered all the communities and flattened everything to start all over. But we can't do that because we know there are no state actors holding other people against their will. So we have to be very deliberate. There are instances where we've gone for attack because civilians were there, we call off the strike.
Families and BBOG activists disagree. They say authorities have not shown the political will to address the problem. On Sunday, they remembered the girls on the 10th year anniversary of their abduction.
Unfortunately, the Chibok girls' abduction was only the beginning of countless abductions that have led to a thriving abduction industry in our nation, since the government have refused to bring the perpetrators of the abduction of our Chibok girls to book.
Sadly, You could even see people that are supposed to take the necessary action, especially the security agencies, providing excuses for what happened, that the children have been taken to a difficult terrain to be accessed. If the terrorists can access a difficult terrain, what more of our security forces?
Until the girls are freed, many like Mutar will be waiting for some sense of closure. Timothy Obiezu, VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
Still to come, Donald Trump's hush money trial starts Monday. We'll be right back.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linoch Mudu, in Washington every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In other news, Chad's interim president Mahamat Idris Deby has kicked off his presidential campaign for an election in May meant to end 3 years of military rule. Deby is promising to strengthen security and boost the economy. His government is one of several juntas that seized power in West and Central Africa since 2020, drawing concerns over democratic backslide. In Nigeria's power grid failed for the 5th time this year early Monday. The failure highlights the country's inability to provide reliable electricity after raising tariffs for wealthier consumers by 230% 2 weeks ago. The transmission company of Nigeria, which oversees the grid, has not yet issued a statement on the cost. The first criminal trial of a former U.S. president is underway in New York City on Monday. Donald Trump's hush money case began with jury selection. Separately, President Joe Biden, who is seeking re-election, hits the campaign trail in Pennsylvania. VOA's Veronica Balderas Iglesias has more.
The battleground state of Pennsylvania was the last election campaign stop for Donald Trump ahead of his hush money trial on Monday in New York. He faces 34 felony counts of falsifying business records allegedly to hide a 2006 sexual encounter with porn star Stormy Daniels. During Saturday's rally in Schnecksville, the presumptive Republican presidential candidate once again decried the case as a witch hunt.
They're all Biden trials, you know that, right? And I'm proud to do it for you. Have a good time watching.
Since this will be the first criminal trial ever of a former president, the case will indeed be under scrutiny, noted political analyst Calvin Dark.
I believe that so far the judges, for the most part, judges and the prosecutors, have done a really good job in trying to make sure that the treatment that Trump gets is as close as possible to what the average American would expect if they were in a similar situation.
Appearing Sunday on ABC's This Week, the governor of New Hampshire, Republican Chris Sununu, said he doesn't expect the hush money trial will have major political ramifications for Trump.
He'll probably go back on the campaign trail and almost like rehash what's going on. He'll try to victimize it, and that has worked for him.
Bless you all.
President Joe Biden's attention, meanwhile, has been fully engaged in the response to Saturday's attack by Iran on Israel. But he's also expected to hit the campaign trail this coming week with a 3-day visit to Pennsylvania. The main talking point, the economy.
He's going to be talking about the fact that there's some indications of improvement in the economy, although the inflation report list last week was not a good one for the administration.
Another topic that the Biden campaign has been boosting and could continue to focus on this week is the protection of reproductive rights, especially after Trump said last week that the decision on abortion should be left to the states. Veronica Valderas Iglesias, VOA News, Washington.
For more insight on the start of Donald Trump's hush money trial, let's go live to New York, where VOA's Tina Trien is standing by. Tina, is it even possible for Donald Trump to receive a fair trial in New York?
Hi, Esther. You know what's interesting is actually in their bid to try and get this trial moved outside of New York, Trump's defense team commissioned a survey among 400 Manhattan residents, asking them if they had read about the trial. The majority had read, and his legal team took this as an indication that they would not receive a fair trial in New York, that since 35% of respondents said that they believed Trump was guilty, therefore Trump would not receive a fair trial. What they failed to mention, actually, is that the majority of these respondents actually said they still could be fair and impartial in this particular trial, despite having read all about the trial and having knowledge of it. So the jury selection process is proceeding.
And what are you learning from those attending the hearing and, you know, the public that mirrors around the courthouse? Because, you know, Trump has his following.
Definitely. Anytime Donald Trump is in New York, you can count on his supporters coming out. There have been dozens who have arrived outside of the courthouse behind me today, rallying for Trump, saying that this is political persecution, echoing a lot of the same language that he's saying, that this is an assault on America and this is election interference. But again, these 34 felony counts are really the bread and butter of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. They prosecute other individuals far less famous every day on these same charges of falsifying business records. And it's less so about the hush money that was paid and more about how they were actually recorded as business and legal expenses when they weren't, to cover up the fact that of these alleged affairs in the run-up to the 2016 election.
Tina, it's an election year. We'll have a little more to talk about all of these issues. Thank you so much for your reporting.
Thank you.
Tina Trien reporting live for us from New York. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.